We go on to another story today. No American city knows the woes of the flagging economy better than the city of Detroit, Michigan. Last week, the cash-strapped city filed for bankruptcy as a means of regaining some fiscal health. It owes a staggering $18 to $20 billion to its creditors. A lot of its problems have to be attributed to the city's shrinking tax base. The population has fallen from 1.8 million people to 700,000 since its peak 50 years ago. A U.S. bankruptcy judge yesterday dealt a blow to public employee unions fighting the bankruptcy filing. The judge suspended all legal challenges in the state court while he reviews the city's petition for protection from creditors. Bill Brandt is with us on the phone to explain the city's financial crisis. He is the president and CEO of Development Specialists Incorporated. Bill, we talked to you earlier this year when we thought that this was on the horizon. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to talk to us again today. Now, the judge has ruled that that Detroit will be extended the shield under Chapter 9 bankruptcy. Can you explain what protections that this Chapter 9 filing provides for the city?
At this point, the Chapter 9 protections are fairly limited. One of the principles of the bankruptcy code generally in any chapter is something we call the automatic stay. And that basically prevents creditors from trying to attach assets of the city or the corporation if it's a Chapter 11, or attaching bank accounts, or, frankly, pursuing lawsuits that cause either the corporation or, in this case, the city to have to spend money in other forums to defend them. And what Judge Rhodes did yesterday was said is, I'm not sure this is yet going to be a Chapter 9, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but for the time being, while I decide that this, rather than having this scattershot approach in a variety of state courts all over Michigan, it's all going to be consolidated under a federal case here in the bankruptcy court in Detroit.
All right, and as you just alluded to, there is a sort of a two-step process to this. He has granted the relief, but the city then has a certain amount of time to prove that it should stay in bankruptcy. As I understand, Stockton, California had several months to prove it. San Bernardino took more than a year. How long will Detroit have?
My suspicion is there'll be a trial on this probably after all of the extensions and whatnot happen, not till the beginning first months of next year. I would think that this is a hotly contested matter. This case begins in acrimony and probably dissolves into animus pretty quickly. The stakes and the numbers are far higher than Stockton or Vallejo or San Bernardino. So this is going to get pretty nasty. I would also suggest to you that the cuts being suggested here are far greater than anything that's ever been suggested. And so people are taking this very seriously, and I think this is a zero-sum game. So I suspect that Judge Rhodes, although he's entered not really an order for relief, he's allowed the automatic stay to go in, he's now going to have a trial to determine whether Detroit is eligible for relief under Chapter 9. I think he's going to have motions that'll take up most of the fall, some pretrial hearings. The actual trial on this, I look for February or March of next year at the earliest.
Well, and part of the reason that this is going to get nasty is, of course, most of the city workers are against this protection because they believe it affects their pension, the amount of pension that they become eligible for. Many thought they had a constitutional right to their pension. Why don't they?
They do. And that's the interesting issue here. Many states, Michigan is one of them, Illinois and Pennsylvania are two others of note of large size, have a constitutional prohibition in their state constitutions against altering or amending or diminishing existing employee pension plans. There's a reason for that. The simple reason is back in 1933 and 34 when the Social Security system was set up, public employees were not made a part of it. They are free to go bargain on a separate pension basis with their various governmental employers, but they don't participate in Social Security, which means, of course, if their pensions here are rejected or severely cut like they were earlier this year in Central Falls, Rhode Island, there's no safety net for these people largely to fall back on, as they aren't going to get Social Security checks no matter what anybody says.
Of course, part of this is not only relieving the debt, but generating some revenue. We've been showing pictures of some of the artwork in the museums there. Can the city sell off art to raise money?
Well, it's an interesting concept. You know, the reason that Judge Rhodes is pulling all of this litigation into the bankruptcy court, and the reason that the pension plans are so worried about this is there's something called the Supremacy Clause in the U.S. Constitution, which says essentially that federal law will trump state law where state law gets in the way of federal law. And so there are a lot of people worried that the state constitutional prohibitions will be overridden by the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution. What I'm telling you is if the supremacy clause can override the state constitution as to employee benefits, it can certainly override recent attempts by the state legislature to protect the art in the DIA, the Detroit Institute of Art. I think everything is in play, and you don't get to pick and choose which part of the case the supremacy clause applies to. I think it's not just the art, but a number of other assets in Detroit, including Belle Isle, the famous recreational island off in the Detroit River that the city has looked at lovingly, or I should say the state has looked at lovingly for some period of time.
Yeah, we're going to have to stop right there. So much more to talk about. But Bill Brandt, thank you so much for taking a few minutes with us. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure. Glad to be with you.
All right. Talk to you again soon.